What if the place that once shattered your childhood was also where you'd have to face your past to finally reclaim yourself? The city of Rosemore sparkled under the early evening haze, all glass towers and distant sirens, elegant on the outside, restless underneath. Lena Whitmore stood barefoot on the cold tiles of a high-rise apartment bathroom, letting the warm shower mist wrap around her like a fragile shield. At 25, she had returned to Rosemore after 2 decades away. Her heart beat not from comfort, but from the quiet ache of memories, too long buried. The mirror was fogged mercifully. She didn't want to look at her own reflection yet. This wasn't home, just a space assigned to her by Stratton Holdings, a name she'd seen in childhood whispers, one that had always felt too close to something she didn't understand. But she was here now, not by chance. There was a reason pulsing beneath her ribs, old and burning. Then bang. The door burst open like a gunshot. Lena spun, drenched and startled, a towel clutched tightly around her. "Who are you?" Her voice cracked more from fear than fury. A tall man stood at the doorway, sharp suit, loose tie, eyes wide with disbelief. I thought, I didn't know anyone was here, he said quickly, voice rough with shock. I didn't mean to. You just walk into people's bathrooms? She snapped, heart racing. He held up his hands, a slight, crooked smile forming despite the tension. Only when I think someone might be in trouble. It's a terrible habit, apparently. Lena's breath came hard, adrenaline buzzing under her skin. But then his face shifted humor, replaced by alertness. Wait, don't move. He stepped forward, eyes fixed on the window behind her. Someone just ran through here. I was chasing him. Her voice dropped, confused and sharp. Chasing someone? Into my apartment? He nodded, stepping around her. There was a break-in 2 floors below. My office. I own the building. I think the guy's hiding in here. Before Lena could respond, something moved. A dark figure lunged through the window, a flash of silver, a knife. Lena's scream caught in her throat as she stumbled back. The man didn't hesitate. He lunged, catching the attacker's wrist, twisting it until the blade dropped with a metallic clatter. The two struggled brief, brutal, until the intruder was pinned against the tiled wall, breath ragged. "Who sent you?" the man hissed, voice colder than the marble floor. No answer, just resistance. He grabbed a towel from the rack and bound the man's hands with quiet precision, like he'd done this before. He looked back at Lena, concern flickering behind his steady, green eyes. "You all right?" Lena nodded, but her hands betrayed her, trembling like leaves in wind. I think so, thanks to you." The man dragged the intruder into the living room, tossing him like a bag of regret onto the hardwood. "Don't move," he muttered darkly. Then he turned, met Lena's eyes again. She hadn't moved from the hallway, still wrapped in terry cloth, still unsure if this was the beginning of something, or the return of everything she once ran from. "I suppose I owe you an explanation," he says quietly, rubbing the back of his neck with a sheepish glance. "I'm Callum Strayed, CEO of Strayed Industries." That man was after classified files from my office downstairs. Lena folds her arms, still watching him with caution. The initial fear has dulled, replaced by something warier, curiosity maybe. "Lena Whitmore," she replies curtly. "Just moved in this morning. Didn't exactly expect to be part of a break-in on my first day." Callum studies her for a moment, as if trying to fit her into a story he's only just remembered. Then he crouches, picking something up from the floor, a delicate silver chain, tangled slightly, its heart-shaped pendant glinting under the light. "This yours?" he asks, holding it up. Lena's breath catches in her throat. Her eyes lock onto the necklace. It's hers, her mother's, the one thing she clung to after everything fell apart. She snatches it gently from his hand, fingers trembling. "Yes, where did he get this?" Callum shrugs. his expression unreadable. Probably grabbed it while running through. Lucky I caught him. Before she can respond, footsteps echo down the hallway. Two men in dark suits sweep into the apartment, Strady's private security. Without a word, they take the intruder into custody. Callum nods at them. Take care of it. As the room calms, he turns back to Lena. You sure you're all right? That could have ended badly. She nods, gripping the necklace like a lifeline. I'm okay. Just not used to this kind of welcome. He chuckles a low, genuine sound that softens the edges of his sharp jaw. Well, I guess that makes me your unexpected hero. There are worse ways to meet. Lena rolls her eyes, but can't suppress the faint curl of a smile. Don't flatter yourself. Callum steps closer, something shifting in his tone. Strange thing, though. Your name. Whitmore. Sounds familiar? She stiffens, subtle but unmistakable. It's a common name, she says quickly, too quickly. He tilts his head, the smile fading into thoughtfulness. Maybe, but I remember details. My grandfather, Charles Strade, once arranged an engagement decades ago with a family named Whitmore. For me. That ring any bells? Her stomach drops. The engagement. She'd heard whispers growing up, bits of her mother's late-night stories, fragments from a life that slipped away. She scoffs, forcing a laugh. That's ridiculous. I think I'd remember if I were engaged to someone like you. He raises an eyebrow. Someone like me? What's that supposed to mean? She meets his gaze, steady and defiant, rich, arrogant, and clearly unfamiliar with the concept of knocking. He laughs this time louder, less guarded. Fair enough, but I'll prove it. Granddad still has the paperwork somewhere. Before she can push back, he pulls a business card from his jacket and holds it out. If you ever want to talk about that necklace or anything else, call me. I owe you after tonight. She takes the card hesitantly. Their fingers brush. The moment is small, but it lingers. I don't need favors, she says quietly. I'm here for my own reasons. Callum studies her, as if sensing there's far more she isn't saying. Matters of the heart? Or something deeper? She doesn't answer. Her silence speaks volumes. He nods, eyes dark, with something unspoken. Well, Lena Whitmore, take care of yourself. I have a feeling we'll meet again. And then he's gone. Lena stands alone in the quiet apartment, the necklace cold against her skin. She sinks slowly onto the couch, the business card still in her hand. I didn't come back to Rosemore for love, she murmurs, almost to herself. I came for answers. Her eyes rise to the window, where the city stretches endlessly into the night. This was once her home, a place filled with loss and shadow. Callum Strade may have saved her life tonight, but she knows better than to get distracted. Not now. Not when she's finally this close to uncovering the truth that shattered her family. Lena sat in the quiet, the silver necklace clenched gently in her hand, the heart-shaped pendant pressing into her skin like a silent vow. She could still feel the echoes of the night, the rush, the fear, and that stranger, Callum Strade, whose timing had been too perfect to ignore. His words replayed in her mind like a faint echo down a long hallway. But she didn't come here for him. Outside the tall windows, the city of Rosemore shimmered under the weight of midnight. Inside, the silence wrapped around her like fog, thick, still, and suffocating. On the table in front of her sat the business card he'd left behind. White, clean, cold. His name printed in bold letters that somehow felt heavier than they should. Callum Strade, CEO, Strade Industries. Her fingers hovered over the card, tracing its edge. Then, without a word, she set it aside and reached for the necklace instead. This mattered more. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a memory, a connection, a fragment of the mother she lost too soon. As the pendant glinted under the soft lamplight, Lena leaned back against the couch, eyes slipping closed. The stillness of the room gave way to memory, warmth and ache, swirling together. Her voice broke the silence, soft and certain. I didn't return to Rosemore for a hero, or a husband. I came for my mother. Her thoughts drifted back 7 years ago. She was 18 then, living in a quiet town that time had forgotten. The kind of place where grief didn't echo, it settled in your bones. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through a dusty old box left behind after her mother's funeral, she'd found it. A gift kept safe by Mrs. Hallie, the neighbor who had taken her in when no one else would. She said you'd need this one day, Mrs. Hallie had told her, eyes kind but distant. Inside the box was a worn leather journal, the spine cracked, pages yellowing like old secrets. Her mother's handwriting stretched across every line, firm at first, then frantic. The moment Lena opened it, something in her shifted forever. She remembered sitting cross-legged on the floor, the journal trembling in her lap. Tears blurred the ink, but she forced herself to read. Her mother, Marianne Whitmore, had written everything the life she'd tried to build, the man she'd married, and the slow unraveling that followed. The final entries were rushed, frantic. He's stealing from strayed industries. He doesn't know I found the papers. But Judith does. If I speak, they'll kill me. Then one final trembling line unfinished. If anything happens to me, protect Lena. Lena remembered the way her throat ached that night as she cried into her pillow, clutching the journal like it was her mother's hand. She was too young to stop it then, but not too young to understand that her mother hadn't drowned in a storm, like the official report claimed. She had been silenced. Her stepfather, Douglas Whitmore, and his new wife, Judith Pierce, had beaten Marianne when she threatened to expose them. They faked the accident, used their wealth and connections to bury the truth. Lena had been 5, barely old enough to remember anything but the sound of waves and the weight of loneliness. She'd been passed from relative to stranger, house to house, until Mrs. Hallie gave her a roof and a little bit of peace. But it was the journal that gave her purpose. It transformed her grief into clarity, her sorrow into fire. Back in the present, Lena opened her eyes. The pendant lay cold in her hand, steady now. I was 18 when I learned the truth, she whispered, old enough to carry it, young enough to believe I could still make it right. For 7 long years, she planned her return. She worked whatever jobs she could find, waitressing, bookkeeping, even cleaning to save. She studied Rosemore from afar, tracked every article, every deal tied to Douglas's growing empire, real estate, politics, wealth bought through betrayal, and now she was back, not to start over, but to uncover everything they'd buried and make them remember the daughter they tried to erase. She read about Judith in the journal. Her mother had described her as clever, calculating, and cold as glass, a second wife who smiled like a queen and moved like a shadow. And then there was Holly, their daughter, raised with diamond spoons and lies, who adored her father as if he were a god. Lena was no longer a child. At 25, she was ready. I lost my mother, she murmured, standing slowly, her voice barely more than breath. She walked to the window, the city lights of Rosemore shimmering like false stars beyond the glass. Now they're going to lose everything. The next morning, the streets of Rosemore gleamed under the spring sun, polished and proud perfect for those who could afford to pretend. Lena drove past towering buildings, manicured parks, and steel monuments to wealth. Her hands didn't shake, not anymore. The Whitmore estate still stood like a wound stitched into the cliffs, beautiful, cold, and watching the sea. She pulled up to the gates, and they creaked open as if they had been expecting her all along. The breeze caught her dark hair as she stepped out of the car, her heels crunching on the gravel. This was where it ended. where her mother had taken her last breath. Her stomach twisted. But she kept walking. The front door opened before she could knock. Douglas Whitmore stood there, tall and polished, silver hair groomed to perfection. His smile was wide and practiced, but his eyes, those eyes were sharp and unreadable. "Lena," he said, spreading his arms like a performer on stage. "My daughter." After all these years, his voice was honeyed, his touch was warm. But Lena felt nothing but frost. "Good to see you too, Dad." The word tasted like ash. Behind him appeared Judith, her blonde hair drawn tight, pearls resting too neatly at her collarbone. Her smile was elegant, but vacant. "We've missed you," she said, voice sweet and hollow. Lena offered a nod, her lips pressed into a polite line. "Sure you have." The grand foyer swallowed her footsteps. The marble beneath her felt like a museum floor clean, lifeless, curated. From above, heels clicked like gunshots on the staircase. Holly Whitmore, 22, descended slowly, one hand brushing the railing, the other on her hip. She looked like Judith's reflection. Sharp cheekbones, perfect posture, and a smirk that belonged to someone who never learned to lose. "So," Holly said, pausing halfway down, "you're the famous Lena. Back to claim your share of Daddy's empire?" Lena met her gaze without flinching. "Not here for the money, Holly." Holly laughed a short, dismissive sound. "Then what? Love?" She rolled her eyes. "Good luck finding that here." Douglas clapped once, loud enough to break the tension. "Girls, enough. Let's sit. Catch up like family." The living room was vast, with plush sofas and a view of the endless sea. Lena sat stiffly, every muscle ready to bolt, but she smiled like nothing was wrong. "So," Douglas said, sipping amber scotch, "what brings you back after all these years?" Lena breathed in, letting her words fall carefully. "I wanted to see my family, see how you've been." Judith tilted her head like a cat studying prey. "How sweet. And where have you been all this time?" "Around? Small towns mostly," Lena said. "Kept to myself." Holly twirled a strand of hair and smirked. "Sounds dull. Guess you're here to spice things up, huh?" Lena smiled faintly, letting it pass. Something like that. Douglas's face shifted, his charm cooling into something sterner. "Well, you're welcome here. Family's family, right?" Lena looked at him, the man who had destroyed her mother, and something inside her ignited. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Family is everything." That evening, as she drove back through the glowing streets of Rosemore, her hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from focus. From the storm building behind her calm. The Whitmores believed she had come home out of longing, out of weakness. They thought she was lost, but she wasn't lost. She was fire wrapped in silk, and they had no idea what she was about to burn down. Outside her apartment, she paused beneath the street lamp. In her coat pocket, Callum Strade's card still waited a reminder of the strange man who'd stepped into her life just before it began to unravel. She didn't need him, not yet, but he was connected to all of this, and sooner or later, she'd find out just how deep that connection ran. The name Strade Industries lingered in Lena's mind like a shadow that refused to fade. It was the company her father betrayed the empire he had tried to bleed dry in silence. But this wasn't about him anymore. Clutching the necklace, she whispered to herself, steady and certain, "This is about them." Back in her apartment, Lena pulled her mother's journal from the drawer. The pages were soft now from too much handling, from too many late nights spent reading the same lines again and again. She flipped to the last frantic entry. Her voice cracked as she read it aloud. "Protect Lena." She closed the journal gently, as though tucking her mother in one last time, then, With fire rising in her chest, she whispered, "I will," by making them pay. Outside, the city of Rosemore carried on, oblivious to the war brewing in the quiet heart of a daughter who refused to forget. Douglas, Judith, Holly, they had built their world on a foundation of lies and cruelty. Lena was here to tear it down, one truth at a time. She walked through the morning crowds with purpose, the city bathed in golden sunlight, shadows stretching beneath her feet. A week had passed since her run-in with Callum Strayed and her chilling return to the Whitmore mansion. The silver necklace now rested against her collarbone like a quiet vow. Every step she took carried the weight of that promise. And yet, despite her focus, thoughts of Callum kept slipping through the cracks, his voice, his questions. The moment in the bathroom that had somehow turned into something more complicated. His business card sat untouched in her wallet, but never far from her mind. "He's just a distraction," she muttered, trying to convince herself. That's all. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of thought. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. "Meet me at Strayed Tower. 10 a.m. We need to talk. Callum." She stared at the message, conflicted. She didn't owe him anything, but a thread of curiosity tugged at her. Strayed Industries was tied to her father's past, and Callum might know more than he'd let on. Her reply was short. "Fine, I'll be there." With a coffee in hand, she made her way through the heart of Rosemore, until the tower rose in front of her like a monument to everything she hated: wealth, corruption, power. Its walls were glass, gleaming and impersonal. Inside, the lobby was marble and silence, polished to the point of erasure. A receptionist directed her to the top floor, where Callum waited. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands in his pockets, his suit immaculate. At 28, he looked every bit the young CEO, but when he turned and saw her, there was something softer in his eyes. "I'm glad you came," he said, motioning to a chair across from his desk. "Coffee?" Lena held up her to-go cup. "I'm good. What is this about?" He leaned back against the edge of his desk, arms folded across his chest. "You've been on my mind, Lena Whitmore. That necklace. Your name. It all feels too familiar." Her expression tightened. "I told you, it's a common name." Callum nodded slowly, but his gaze didn't waver. "Maybe. But I looked into it anyway. My grandfather's old files mention a Douglas Whitmore. He was a financial director here 20 years ago." Lena's breath caught. So he'd figured it out. "He's my father," she said flatly. "But we're not close." Callum watched her closely. He could tell there was more, but he didn't push. He left under suspicion, embezzlement, missing money, nothing ever proven, but Granddad never trusted him again. Lena's jaw clenched. The journal, the accusations, it was all starting to align. "Interesting," she said, deflecting. "So why are you telling me this?" Callum stepped forward, voice lowering. "Because I don't think you're here just for a family reunion. And I don't want to see you walk into something dangerous alone." Before she could answer, her phone rang loud, sharp, jarring, in the quiet of the room. "Judith." Lena stared at the screen, her heart steady now, no longer afraid, just ready. Judith's voice, sweet as syrup but twice as sharp, filtered through the phone like a trap dressed in lace. "Lena, darling, join us for dinner tonight at the estate. We insist." There was no warmth in the invitation, only performance. Lena hesitated for a moment, then offered the only answer that made sense. "I'll be there." She hung up and glanced at Callum, who was still standing near his desk, watching her carefully. "Family dinner," she said dryly. "Seems I'm suddenly popular." He raised a brow, amused. "Need a +1?" She rolled her eyes. "I'll survive." As she walked out, he called after her. "If you need backup, you've got my number." That evening, Lena returned to the Whitmore estate, wrapped in a simple black dress that felt like armor. The house loomed as always, magnificent and cold, overlooking the sea like a king with secrets. Douglas greeted her first, his handshake too firm, his grin too wide. Lena, look at you, back home at last. Judith appeared next, her smile stretched thin beneath layers of pearls and pretense. So glad you could make it. Then came Holly, descending the stairs like a queen stepping into court. Nice to see you again, she said, sipping wine, eyes glittering with mischief. Still slumming it? Lena didn't reply. She simply stepped past them and took her place at the long dining table, surrounded by crystal and candlelight. A theater of elegance, a stage for betrayal. Dinner began politely enough, Douglas boasting about his latest investment, Judith chiming in with carefully rehearsed humility. But Lena could feel it, the tension simmering beneath every glance. She was being watched, weighed. Halfway through the meal, Judith leaned forward, voice dripping sugar. Lena, dear, we've heard whispers you've been spending time with Callum Strayed. People are starting to talk. Lena paused, her fork midair. People talk about all sorts of things, she said calmly. Doesn't make it true. Holly let out a laugh, sharp and biting. Oh, come on. A girl like you catching a CEO's attention? It's a great headline. Lena set her fork down and met Holly's gaze, unblinking. I'm not here to catch anyone. I came back for family. Douglas chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good to know. Wouldn't want any scandals. The next morning, the storm hit. Lena awoke to a phone vibrating with dozens of messages. The headlines were everywhere. Mystery woman seen leaving Strayed Tower. Rosemore's most eligible bachelor, targeted by outsider. Paparazzi photos, grainy shots of her stepping out of Callum's office. Speculation, half-truths, twisted into something ugly. She didn't need proof to know where it came from. Judith's voice echoed in her memory. People are talking. It wasn't just gossip. It was a warning. She paced the apartment, fury and hurt tangled inside her, when the phone rang again. Did you see the news? Callum's voice was steady, but she heard the edge beneath it. Yeah, she said, bitter. Your family's doing? There was a pause. She nodded instinctively, forgetting he couldn't see her. Probably Judith and Holly, she added. They're not exactly my biggest fans. Callum was quiet for a moment. Meet me at the pier. We'll figure this out. Against her better judgment, she said yes. The Rosemore Pier was quiet under the gray sky. Callum stood near the railing, wind tugging at his coat, a coffee in each hand. He handed her one without a word. I don't care what they say about you, he said. You're worth more than their lies. Lena blinked, caught off guard. Thanks, but I don't need rescuing. I've handled worse. He took a step closer, eyes gentle but steady. I'm not here to rescue you. I'm here because I want to be. Whatever you're facing, I'm in. She turned away, staring out at the waves crashing below. Her voice dropped. Why do you care? He shrugged, a half smile tugging at his lips. Maybe I see something in you. Maybe I just hate bullies. Take your pick, Lena couldn't help it. She smiled. Just barely, but it was enough to let in the light. You're stubborn, she muttered. Callum grinned. Takes one to know one. Their quiet moment by the sea was shattered when Lena's phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. She answered instinctively. A voice, distorted and low, hissed through the line, Stay away from Callum, or you'll regret it. Then silence. Lena lowered the phone, her pulse hammering. Who was it? Callum asked, stepping forward, concern shadowing his features. A threat, she said quietly, sliding the phone into her pocket. Judith's getting creative. Callum's jaw tensed. Let me deal with it. But Lena shook her head. No, this is my war. Over the next few days, Lena moved like a shadow through her old life, quiet, watchful, relentless. One night, under the cover of darkness, she returned to the Whitmore estate. The spare key she had swiped from Holly's handbag during dinner now fit neatly into the side entrance. The house groaned with silence. She crept into Douglas's study, the air thick with cigar smoke and power. A locked drawer caught her eye. With a hairpin and steady hands, she picked the lock. Inside, stacks of financial records, old, stained, and marked with her father's initials. Files from Strayed Industries. Proof. Her phone pressed to the wall outside the library. She caught the sound of voices and argument. "If Lena keeps digging, we're done," Judith snapped. "Those Strayed files could ruin us." Lena hit record. Her hand didn't shake. The next morning, she found Judith alone in the solarium, sipping tea like royalty. Lena stood before her, phone in hand. "I have a recording," she said, steady. "One wrong move, and it'll be everywhere." Judith's face paled, but her smile returned, quickly tight and brittle. "You're playing a dangerous game, Lena." Lena leaned in, voice quiet but sharp. "I learned from the best." That night, Callum showed up at her apartment without warning. There was something different in his eyes, not fear, conviction. "I'm taking you to the gala tomorrow," he said simply. "It's a Strayed Industries event. You belong in that room as much as they do. It's time you stopped hiding." Lena hesitated, but then nodded. "Fine, but don't try anything clever." The gala glowed with opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the ballroom in gold. Lena wore a deep blue dress, the silver pendant at her throat shimmering like a vow. Callum stayed close, his hand brushing hers now and then, as they moved through Rosemore's elite. The whispers swirled. The rumors followed her like shadows. But Callum one glare from him, and they all vanished into silence. Later, he led her out to the balcony. The city sparkled beneath them. Unaware of the storm brewing above. "Marry me," he said. Voice barely above the wind. "Let me stand by you, no matter what comes." Lena froze. Her heart thudded. "I can't," she whispered. "Not until I'm free of them." He didn't argue, just nodded. "I'll wait, but there's something you need to know." He turned, his eyes searching hers. "Your father worked for my family. I believe he played a role in my father's death. A crash that wasn't an accident. My grandfather never proved it. But I've always wondered." Lena's breath caught. The puzzle was shifting. "So we're fighting the same enemy." Callum reached for her hand. "Looks like it." She pulled away, her mind spinning. "I need time." He let her go. No protest, just watched her disappear into the crowd. Back in her apartment, Lena stood alone. The city outside blinked with light, but her focus was elsewhere, on the phone in her hand, playing the same recording again and again. "If Lena keeps digging, we're done. Those Strayed files could ruin us." It had been days since the gala, since Callum's confession and quiet proposal. His words lingered, his touch even more so. But this night was not about love. It was about justice. She opened her closet, pulling out a sleek black dress. The necklace from her mother rested against her chest, cool and familiar her armor. She slipped it on, hands steady. On the table, Callum's business card waited. She stared at it for a moment, then slid it into her purse, just in case. "This is my fight," Lena whispered to herself as she stood in her apartment, staring into the quiet. But even now, she couldn't shake the echo of Callum's voice. "Let me stand by you." She shook her head, grabbed her keys, and walked out. Tonight was not about love. It was about truth. The Serenity Hotel shimmered like a jewel beneath the night sky, its grand ballroom glowing with golden light. Inside, the city's most powerful had gathered wealth, politics, reputation, all under one roof. Lena entered alone, her dark hair swept into a clean updo, her dress simple but striking, and around her neck the silver pendant gleamed like quiet defiance. She moved through the crowd like smoke calm, graceful, but ready to ignite. The event was a ruse, a carefully constructed lie. Her engagement party to Callum Strayed. The Whitmore family, Douglas, Judith, and Holly, had all accepted the invitation without question, eager to bask in the illusion. Near the bar, she spotted them. Douglas, in his crisp tuxedo, all teeth and arrogance. Judith, flawless in a gown of sequins and secrets. And Holly, smirking behind a champagne flute. "Lena, darling," Douglas called, his voice booming as he approached. "What an event! Where's the lucky man?" She smiled thinly. "He'll be here soon. Please enjoy the evening." Judith's gaze lingered too long. She sensed something, but she smiled anyway. "How thoughtful of you. We're very proud." Holly rolled her eyes. "Sure we are. Let's see how long it lasts." Lena said nothing. Instead, she gave a subtle signal to the staff. A special bottle had been reserved for Holly, just enough to loosen the tongue. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew warmer, the buzz of conversation rising over the clink of glasses and soft jazz. Lena moved through the crowd, offering smiles, keeping close watch on the Whitmores. Holly's voice was already louder, her laughter sloppier. It was working. Lena stepped to the microphone, lifting her glass. "Thank you all for being here," she said, her voice steady, echoing across the marble and chandeliers. "Tonight is about beginnings and truth. But first, a toast to family." The crowd raised their glasses, but Holly, now flushed and unsteady, stumbled forward and grabbed the mic. "To family," she slurred with a laugh. "Let's really talk about family, shall we?" Gasps rippled through the room. "Dad's a thief. Mom's a liar. And this whole thing? One big joke." Lena stepped back, feigning shock, though her heart pounded with triumph. Douglas's face turned stone white. Judith lunged for her daughter. "Shut up, you fool," she hissed. But Holly shoved her away. "Oh, please, Mom," she said, slurring louder. "Everyone knows Dad's dirty. He stole from Straight Industries. That's where the money came from, right?" The ballroom buzzed, phones lit up, people recording. The illusion shattered. Lena took a deep breath and acted. She stepped to the podium, connected her phone to the sound system. Judith's recorded voice filled the room. "If Lena keeps digging, we're done. Those Strady files could ruin us." The crowd fell silent. Then chaos erupted. Douglas surged forward, rage in every step. "Turn that off!" he shouted, fists clenched. Before he could reach her, a figure cut through the crowd. Callum Strayed. He moved like gravity itself, his voice low and firm. "Back off, Whitmore." With swift precision, Callum grabbed Douglas's arm and twisted it behind his back. Security moved in, pinning Douglas as he fought back. "You little," Douglas spat toward Lena, but Callum cut him off. "Save it. You're finished." Lena met Callum's eyes, gratitude, surprise, something more flickering between them. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. He shrugged. "Couldn't let you do this alone." She turned back to the crowd, steady and sure. "There's more," she announced. A screen lit up behind her, displaying scanned financial records documents from Strady Industries. Signed by Douglas Whitmore. Money missing. Transactions hidden. "This is what he took?" Lena said. "Millions. And when my mother found out, she was silenced." The room held its breath. "She didn't drown. She was murdered. And they made me forget." Tonight, no one was forgetting. "She found out," Lena said, her voice steady but full of fire, "and he killed her." The ballroom filled with gasps and rising whispers. Lawsuits. Scandal. Words flew through the air like sparks in a dry forest. Douglas stood frozen, color draining from his face. Judith staggered backward, gripping a now delirious Holly, who giggled through her champagne haze. "You've got nothing," Douglas shouted. But even he heard the crack in his voice. Callum stepped forward. His voice was cold, final. "We've got more than enough." He raised a folder, thick, heavy with truth. There's something else. These files link you to my father's death. You didn't just steal from Strayed Industries. You staged a crash to silence him. He handed the folder to a nearby officer. My grandfather kept this hidden for years. The police have it now. Douglas lunged in fury, but security grabbed him, pinning him to the floor. Judith screamed, "This is a setup!" before grabbing Holly and fleeing through the nearest exit, the crowd parting like water in their wake. Lena stood still, chest rising and falling with the weight of it all. Triumph, yes, but beneath it, exhaustion, grief, relief. The room had descended into chaos, some guests recording, others whispering or slipping out quietly. Callum turned to her, his expression softening. "You did it," he said quietly. "They're finished." She barely had time to nod before a sharp sound cut through the air, a gunshot. A man emerged from the shadows, face hidden beneath a hood, a gun raised and shaking. "Strayed," he snarled and fired. Callum shoved Lena aside, taking the bullet in his shoulder. He collapsed as screams erupted across the ballroom. "No!" Lena dropped to her knees, blood soaking into the hem of her gown. "Callum, stay with me!" The gunman, a thug tied to Douglas's former associates, vanished into the crowd, chased by security. Callum groaned, his face pale, eyes struggling to stay open. "Guess I'm not bulletproof," he whispered, forcing a weak smile. Lena pressed her hands to his wound. "Don't you dare die on me," she said, tears falling freely now. "Not now." Voices called for help. The sirens were distant at first, then louder. Paramedics pushed through the chaos, lifted Callum onto a stretcher. Lena climbed into the ambulance beside him, her hands still holding his. "You fought for me?" she whispered through tears. "I was so wrong to push you away. Just hold on." At Rosemore General, they rushed him into surgery. Lena was left alone in the waiting room, blood on her dress, her phone buzzing with news. Douglas arrested. The scandal flooding headlines. Judith and Holly had vanished, but none of it mattered. She sat in the corner, hands trembling, heart cracked open. "I can't lose him," she murmured into her palms. Time slowed. The clock ticked past midnight. Then dawn. Finally, a nurse approached. "He's stable," she said with a small smile. "You can see him soon." Relief rushed through Lana's chest, but it was short-lived. The doctor stepped in next, his face somber. "He made it through surgery, but he's in a coma." The bullet was close to the spine. "We don't know when or if he'll wake up." Lena's knees nearly gave out. She braced herself against the wall, whispering, "He has to." They led her into the room. Machines beeped softly around the still form of Callum Strayed. Tubes, monitors, silence. She pulled a chair close and took his hand. "I was wrong," she whispered, tears burning in her throat. "You fought for me, when no one else did. Please. Fight for yourself now." She stayed with him through the night, her body weary, her soul heavier than ever. She had won, but the price felt unbearable. And then, just as the first light of dawn touched the sky, he stirred, a soft rasp, barely audible. "Couldn't leave you fighting alone, could I?" Her head shot up, his eyes fluttered open, and a slow, tired smile found its way to his lips. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and for the first time in years, she felt hope. Lena laughed through her tears, her fingers tightening around his. "You scared me, you idiot," she whispered. Callum gave the faintest chuckle, his lips twitching into a crooked smile. "Worth it." She sat at his bedside, in Rosemore General, her hand never once leaving his. Morning light spilled gently through the blinds, painting soft golden stripes across his pale face. It had been hours since the storm at the Serenity Hotel, since Lena's plan had finally shattered the Whitmore legacy and nearly cost Callum his life. But he'd lived. "Couldn't let you face them alone," he had murmured when he first opened his eyes. She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, the relief on her face too raw to hide. "You're awake," she breathed. "Don't ever do that to me again." Callum met her eyes, exhausted but present. "No promises," he murmured. "Had to make sure you'd miss me." Lena laughed, a sound caught between a sob and something closer to joy. "I did. More than I thought I would." Doctors came and went, checking monitors, adjusting IV lines. One looked over the charts and said quietly, "He's lucky. The bullet missed anything vital." "He'll recover, but slowly." Lena nodded, her gaze never leaving Callum. "He'll rest," she said. "I'll make sure of it." In the days that followed, Callum began to heal his body, slow to mend, but his spirit never wavered. Lena stayed close. She brought him coffee in the mornings, read headlines out loud, kept him up to date on the whirlwind of fallout after the gala. The news was relentless. Douglas Whitmore, arrested and charged with embezzlement, conspiracy, and obstruction. Judith and Holly vanished, their names now tangled with disgrace and scandal. "They're gone," Lena said one afternoon, scrolling through her phone. "No one's seen them since the night of the gala." Callum shifted against his pillows, wincing slightly. "Good riddance," he muttered. "They built their lives on lies." It was time someone lit a match. Lena set her phone aside, her voice soft. "You didn't have to protect me." Callum reached for her hand. His grip was weak, but it was enough. "Yeah, I did. You're worth it, Lena." She looked away, her throat tight. For so long, she had fought alone. She had carried her pain in silence. But now, here he was, proof that love didn't have to arrive when the war was over. Sometimes it walked into the fire beside you. A week later, Callum was strong enough to sit upright, though he still moved slowly. One afternoon, as Lena adjusted the blanket across his lap, he caught her hand in his. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what I asked you at the gala." She froze. That night. That question. "Callum, I—" He stopped her gently, his voice low but steady. "Let me finish. I know you had reasons to say no, but I meant it. I still do. Marry me, Lena. Let's build something new. Just us. No more battles." She stared at him, heart pounding. For so long, she had only wanted one thing: justice, closure, freedom. Love had never been part of the plan, but maybe it should have been. "You're impossible," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "But yes, this time, I'm ready." Callum's smile broke slowly across his face, as if it hurt to form, but he didn't care. He pulled her gently toward him, kissing her softly despite the ache in his shoulder. "Good," he murmured against her lips, "because I wasn't taking no for an answer." A month later, they stood in a quiet chapel on the edge of Rosemore. The sea beyond the stained glass whispered like memory. Their wedding was small, simple. No cameras, no headlines. Just healing. Callum leaned on a cane, his suit neatly tailored to hide what time would eventually erase. Lena wore a dress her mother would have loved. The silver heart-shaped pendant still hung at her throat. The past had broken them both, but today, they chose to begin again, together. Lena wore a simple, white dress that flowed like quiet resolve. Around her neck, her mother's necklace shimmered in the soft light, a piece of the past now resting peacefully in the present. In the front row of the little Rosemore Chapel, Walter Strayed, Callum's grandfather, sat tall despite his age, his weathered hands folded in his lap, pride warming his wrinkled face. "You two were meant to find each other," he said gently during the ceremony, his voice rough but full of heart. Only a few guests surrounded them, close friends, loyal colleagues, each one clapping and smiling as Lena and Callum exchanged their vows. "I promise to stand by you," Callum said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Always." Lena smiled, her voice quiet but clear. And I promise to let you, she said, a playful sparkle in her tone. After the reception, they slipped away, walking hand in hand to the cliffs that overlooked Rosemoor's harbor, the same cliffs where Lina's mother had taken her last breath so many years ago. The wind tugged at Lena's veil as she stared out at the sea, the horizon painted in soft gold. This is where it happened, she murmured. Where they took her from me. Callum slipped an arm around her, mindful of the shoulder still healing beneath his suit. She'd be proud of you, he said. You did what she couldn't. You brought the truth into the light. Lena leaned against him, her heart full but calm. I got justice, she said, but I also got something I never expected. I got you. Months passed, and life shifted. Douglas Whitmore's trial ended with a unanimous guilty verdict. His name once carved into stone, now etched in shame. Judith and Holly remained on the run, their faces splashed across tabloids, as symbols of a fallen empire. Lena moved into Callum's penthouse, a space of light and glass high above the city she once despised. But now it felt different, redeemed, reclaimed. She joined Strayed Industries, not as a figurehead, but as a force. She dove into the very ledgers Donald had corrupted, setting them right number by number. You're good at this, Callum told her one evening, watching her decipher spreadsheets. Better than me, maybe. She smirked, teasing. Don't get used to it. I'm just here to clean up the mess. Together, they rebuilt the company from the inside out. Leaner, cleaner, stronger. Lena's sharp instincts caught what Callum overlooked. His vision brought life to her order. They worked late into the night, side by side, eating takeout over balance sheets and laughing between deadlines. I came here to tear everything down, Lena said one night, leaning back in her chair. Callum pulled her gently into his arms. But we're building something instead. That's what we do, he whispered. We fix what's broken. A year after their wedding, they stood on the balcony, watching the city sparkle like it was breathing with them. Lena rested a hand on her stomach, holding the secret she had carried for a week. Callum, she said softly. He turned, sensing something in her voice. What's wrong? She smiled, tears already forming. Nothing's wrong. I'm pregnant. His face lit up. In a second, he scooped her into his arms, laughing despite her gentle protests. A child? He breathed. Our child? She nodded, her eyes shining. Yeah, a fresh start. Walter visited the next morning, champagne in hand and tears in his eyes. He clapped Callum on the shoulder, then pulled Lena into a warm, firm hug. You've brought this family back to life, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Margaret would have loved you for it. I hope so, Lena replied, smiling through tears. They toasted not to revenge, not to victory, but to peace, to better days. The story closed on a crisp afternoon. Lena and Callum walked the shore of Rosemoor Beach, the wind carrying salt and memory. This was where it had all begun and ended. Lena stopped, the waves curling softly at her feet. She reached up and unclasped the necklace, the heart-shaped pendant shining in the sun. This was hers, she said, holding it up. I carried it for her, through everything. Callum stood quietly beside her as she stepped closer to the water's edge. I came back here for justice, she said, but I found something else. She opened her hand, letting the necklace fall into the tide. It sank slowly, caught by the sea. I'm free now, she whispered, and so is she. They stood together as the waves rolled in, the past finally at peace and the future waiting, wide and bright ahead. I came here for revenge, Lena whispered, her gaze fixed on the endless horizon where sky met sea. But I found love instead. She opened her hand. The heart-shaped necklace, once heavy with grief and memory, slipped from her fingers, catching the light one last time before disappearing into the tide below. It's not a loss, she said softly, her voice almost carried away by the wind. It's a release. Callum stepped closer, wrapping an arm around her waist and drawing her gently to him. "You're free now?" he murmured. Lena nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "Yeah? Free to be us." They turned slowly, walking back along the shore. Behind them, the waves folded gently over the place where the past had been laid to rest. Their shadows stretched ahead of them, long and golden in the fading light. Lena closed her eyes for a moment and let the breeze carry her words. "This is for you, Mom," she whispered. "I'm finally home." The camera pulled back, the frame widening. Rosemore glowed in the distance, bathed in the soft amber of twilight, a city of contradictions, secrets, and storms, but also a city of second chances. Lena and Callum walked hand in hand, their steps light, their hearts open. There were no more battles to fight, only quiet moments to live, and with each step forward, their future unfolded not perfectly, but truthfully. And that, somehow, was enough. Sometimes we set out chasing justice, or closure, or answers we think will fix everything. But healing doesn't always come from winning, it often comes from letting go. From allowing ourselves to move on, to love again, to build something new. Because what was broken can still become beautiful. Thank you for listening with your heart, for walking beside our characters through their pain, their healing, and their rediscovery of love. This story wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about finding light after darkness, and strength and vulnerability. Your presence, your time, and your open hearts mean more than words can express. We hope this story reminded you that even in the most broken places, something beautiful can begin again. Wherever you are in your own journey, we're honored to have shared this moment with you. With all our gratitude, the Shining Stories team.